Marcus Aurelius understood something that most people fail to grasp. The first battle of the day is fought in the mind. Before he stepped into the world, before he faced the duties of an emperor, before he dealt with the endless demands of Rome, he conquered himself. He knew that the morning is the foundation upon which the entire day is built, and if the morning is weak, the day is weak. If the first thoughts of the day are undisciplined, the mind remains undisciplined. If a man allows himself to start the day in idleness, distraction, and comfort, he has already surrendered control. Marcus Aurelius did not allow himself this weakness. He began each day with intention, with discipline, with a firm grasp on his own mind before the world could grasp it for him. He did not wake up seeking pleasure or entertainment. He did not check for praise or worry about the opinions of others. He did not reach for indulgence or delay his responsibilities. He rose to serve a higher purpose, to face whatever the day would bring with clarity, strength, and wisdom. He knew that how a man starts his morning determines how he will handle the challenges ahead, and so he treated the early hours not as a time for leisure, but as a time for preparation. The first test of the day was the comfort of the bed. Marcus Aurelius, though emperor, did not believe in luxury. He understood that indulgence weakens the will, that too much comfort makes a man soft, that a body accustomed to ease will resist effort. He knew that in the early hours, the mind makes excuses, whispering that more sleep is needed, that the warmth of the blankets is too pleasant to leave behind, that the work can wait a little longer. But he did not listen. He reminded himself that he was a man, not a beast, not a creature made for nothing but pleasure. He reminded himself that he had been given a duty, a purpose, a responsibility to fulfill, and that it was his role to rise and meet it. At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work, as a human being. What do I have to complain about if I'm going to do what I was born for? Marcus Aurelius refused to let laziness dictate his actions. He understood that every moment wasted in hesitation was a moment stolen from his purpose. The bed, no matter how comfortable, was a trap, and he refused to be its prisoner. He rejected the weakness that whispered for him to rest longer. He reminded himself that life is short, that time is the most valuable resource, and that every day he wasted was one less day he had to fulfill his mission. Once he had overcome the first challenge of the day, he turned inward. Before he faced the world, he trained his mind. He reminded himself of what lay ahead, the people who would frustrate him, the setbacks that would test him, the responsibilities that would weigh on him. He did not expect an easy day, nor did he wish for one, because he knew that life was not meant to be easy. He understood that every hardship, every inconvenience, every unexpected trial was not an obstacle but an opportunity to practice virtue. He told himself, today I will meet people who are selfish, who are ignorant, who are arrogant, but I will not let them change me. I will remain calm, rational, and unmoved by their weaknesses. This was not just an exercise in positive thinking. This was preparation for battle. He was training himself to be unshaken. He was preparing his mind to remain strong in the face of insult, to remain steady in the presence of failure, to remain disciplined when everything around him tempted him toward weakness. He knew that the world would test him, that emotions would try to take hold of him, that anger, impatience, and frustration would come naturally, but he refused to be ruled by them. He would rule himself. Marcus Aurelius also understood that the greatest enemy is not the world, but one's own thoughts. If a man does not take control of his mind in the morning, he will be a slave to it for the rest of the day. He disciplined himself to reject negativity, to silence self-pity, to destroy every weak and useless thought before it had the chance to take root. He refused to indulge in resentment, refused to dwell on things outside of his control, refused to let anxiety steal his focus. He reminded himself that only his actions were his own. He could not change others, he could not control fate, he could not prevent hardship, but he could control his reaction to them. And so, every morning, he reaffirmed his philosophy. He reminded himself that pleasure is temporary, that desires are endless, that the pursuit of meaningless indulgences leads only to regret. He understood that wealth, power, and comfort were distractions, that true peace comes not from having more, but from needing less. He reminded himself that death was inevitable, that each day was a gift that would not be given again, that time was slipping away whether he used it wisely or not. He did not begin his day by seeking comfort. He did not wake up chasing approval. He did not allow his mind to be distracted by things that did not matter. Instead, he trained himself in discipline, in humility, in resilience. He prepared himself to meet every difficulty with calmness, to face every challenge with patience, to endure every hardship without complaint. He reminded himself that mastery over the self is the only true mastery. Before speaking to others, before stepping into the world, before attending to his empire, he won the battle of the mind. He understood that the world is chaotic, that people are unpredictable, that life is full of things beyond our control. But the man who has mastered himself can endure anything. He can face insult without anger. He can suffer misfortune without despair. He can lose everything and still remain unshaken. Marcus Aurelius knew that every morning was a test of his own resolve, a chance to determine whether he would live as a man of discipline or allow himself to be ruled by impulses. He believed that waking up was not merely the beginning of the day but a ritual, a conscious decision to face life as a warrior rather than a slave to comfort and distraction. He did not trust the mind to remain strong on its own. It had to be trained, sharpened, and prepared for battle. Each morning, as he rose from his bed, he reminded himself that his time was limited, that every day was one step closer to the end, that the luxury of idleness was a deception. He had seen men waste their lives believing they would always have tomorrow, that discipline could be delayed, that their responsibilities could wait. But he rejected this weakness. He had witnessed firsthand how even the greatest men fall when they let their minds grow soft, when they give in to indulgence, when they trade purpose for comfort. He had watched emperors before him crumble under the weight of their own excess, their kingdoms collapsing not from war or famine, but from the slow decay of their own character. He refused to be like them. He knew that his greatest task was not ruling Rome, it was ruling himself. Before he could lead others, he had to lead his own mind. Before he could command an empire, he had to command his own impulses. If he could not master his emotions, his cravings, his reactions, then he was not truly a ruler. He was just another man consumed by his own weaknesses. Every morning, he asked himself one question: will I control the day, or will the day control me? He knew that the answer depended on the first actions he took, the first thoughts he allowed, the first decisions he made. If he began the morning by seeking ease, by indulging in idle thoughts, by delaying action, then the rest of the day would follow in that weakness. If he allowed his mind to drift, to be ruled by emotions, to be pulled in 1,000 directions by desires and distractions, then he would spend the day enslaved to them. But if he began with discipline, clarity, and focus, then nothing the day threw at him could shake him. He understood that suffering was not something to be feared, but something to be endured with grace. He reminded himself that hardship was inevitable, that pain was part of life, that no man, not even an emperor, could escape misfortune. He had seen men beg for easier lives, plead with the gods to remove their burdens, curse the difficulties they faced. But he knew that these men were weak because they had failed to understand a fundamental truth. Life is not about escaping hardship, but about becoming strong enough to bear it. He refused to wish for ease. Instead, he wished for the strength to endure whatever came his way. Before he stepped into the world each morning, he strengthened himself against all that could shake him. He reminded himself that men would insult him, that those he trusted might betray him, that plans would fail, that suffering would come, that disappointment was unavoidable. But none of this would matter if he remained in control of his mind. He would not lower himself to anger. He would not waste energy on resentment. He would not allow setbacks to break him. He would face everything with composure, because nothing was more important than remaining the master of himself. He trained himself to see the world as it truly was, not as he wished it to be. He knew that most men lived in illusion, that they expected fairness where there was none, that they craved recognition and feared failure. He rejected these weaknesses. He reminded himself that life owed him nothing, that people's opinions were meaningless, that his worth was not measured by applause or approval. He understood that if he lived for the praise of others, he would forever be their prisoner. If he depended on validation, he would never be free. Instead, he sought fulfillment in one thing only: living with honor, discipline, and wisdom. He reminded himself that his actions, not his desires, defined him. He refused to let emotions dictate his behavior. He refused to let momentary urges control his fate. He refused to let setbacks make him bitter. He knew that greatness was not achieved through power or status, but through the quiet strength of a man who remains unshaken, no matter what the world throws at him. And so, every morning, he prepared himself as a warrior prepares for battle. He reminded himself that the world was unpredictable, that each day would bring new struggles, that he could not control what happened to him, but he could control how he responded. He saw every hardship as a test, every difficulty as an opportunity to prove his resilience, every insult as a chance to strengthen his patience. He understood that the true enemy was never the outside world, it was the weakness within. He did not allow himself to complain. He did not permit self-pity. He did not dwell on things beyond his control. He focused only on what he could change: his actions, his thoughts, his discipline. He made no excuses for himself. He did not seek comfort in distraction. He did not waste time longing for a life without hardship. He embraced what was in front of him, because he knew that a man who rejects reality will forever be at war with himself. Each morning, he reminded himself of one final truth: he could die at any moment. He understood that time was the one thing he could never reclaim, that every wasted day was a day closer to the end, that every delay, every indulgence, every distraction was a theft from his own potential. He did not fear death, because he knew it was inevitable, but he did fear dying without having lived as the man he was meant to be. He knew that when the final moment came, he would not ask how much power he had gained, how much wealth he had accumulated, or how many people had praised him. The only thing that would matter was whether he had lived with honor, wisdom, and discipline. And so, every morning, he rejected weakness. He refused indulgence. He silenced the part of his mind that sought excuses. He rose not because he wanted to, but because it was his duty. He reminded himself that no matter how powerful he was, no matter how much influence he had, no matter how many people obeyed his commands, if he did not command himself, he commanded nothing. He faced each day not as a burden, but as a chance to prove himself, to refine his character, to strengthen his mind. He embraced difficulty because he knew that ease weakens, but struggle strengthens. He remained calm when others panicked. He remained disciplined when others surrendered to temptation. He remained focused when others were lost in distraction. Because he knew one thing with absolute certainty: a man who has mastered himself has already mastered the world.